The fluorescent lights of Washington, D.C.'s Union Station flickered against the marble floors as Captain Melissa Torres adjusted the weight of her duffel bag. It was 11:47 p.m., and the usual chaos of the transit hub had dwindled to scattered clusters of late-night travelers and the occasional homeless person seeking shelter from the December cold. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Melissa had been traveling for 19 hours straight, first from Camp Lejeune to Andrews Air Force Base, then a series of security briefings that stretched well past dinner, and finally, this last leg to catch the midnight train to Philadelphia. She was supposed to be on leave, visiting her sister for the holidays, but the bag slung over her shoulder told a different story. The olive green canvas was faded and frayed at the edges, held together by duct tape and sheer stubbornness. To anyone glancing at it, the bag looked like military surplus, maybe worth $20 at a thrift store. They would be catastrophically wrong. Melissa moved through the main hall with the efficient gait of someone who'd spent 12 years in the Corps. Her eyes swept the terminal in automatic threat assessment, exits, security positions, potential choke points. Old habits from 3 tours overseas never really left you, even on American soil. She passed a janitor mopping near the Amtrak gates, a young couple arguing quietly by the ticket machines, and an elderly man asleep on a bench with his coat pulled over his face. What she didn't immediately notice was the figure tracking her from behind the marble columns. Raymond Ray Booker had been working at Union Station for the better part of 8 months. Not officially, of course. His office was wherever tourists and travelers let their guard down, near the bathrooms, by the food court after midnight, anywhere exhaustion made people careless. Ray had developed a 6th sense for valuable targets: businessmen with laptop bags, college kids with designer backpacks, and tonight, a woman in civilian clothes with a military bearing and a bag she kept close to her body. The way she held it told Ray everything. People didn't clutch worthless bags like that. They didn't maintain constant physical contact unless something inside mattered. He'd seen it before. Service members carrying electronics, cash from deployment, sometimes even weapons they weren't supposed to have stateside. Whatever was in that duffel, it was worth the risk. Ray watched as Melissa paused to check the departure board. Her attention diverted for exactly 4 seconds. That was his window. He moved with practiced speed, not running. Running attracted attention, but walking with purpose, closing the 15-foot gap between them. His hand reached out, fingers already gripping the canvas strap, when Melissa's body language shifted with startling abruptness. What happened next took less than 2 seconds but would be replayed on security footage dozens of times in the coming hours. Melissa felt the tug on her bag before she saw him. Muscle memory from countless hours of close-quarters combat training took over. She pivoted on her left foot, her right hand releasing the bag strap to deflect his arm upward while her left hand trapped his wrist. The movement was textbook Marine Corps martial arts program, economy of motion, maximum efficiency. Ray's eyes widened as he realized his mistake. He tried to pull back, but Melissa had already committed to the technique. She stepped through with her right foot, creating leverage, and applied a sharp wrist lock that bent his hand backward, at an angle wrists were never meant to achieve. The crack was audible even over the ambient noise of the station. Ray screamed and dropped to his knees, his wrist bent at a grotesque angle. Melissa maintained control for another half-second before releasing him, her hand immediately moving to her bag to ensure it hadn't been compromised. Ray collapsed fully onto the marble floor, cradling his shattered wrist against his chest, his face contorted in agony. "Security!" someone shouted from across the hall. Melissa's mind raced through the implications. She'd just broken a civilian's hand in a public space. Self-defense or not, this would require reports, statements, possibly detention. And the bag, she glanced down at it, the bag couldn't be examined. Not by local police, not by station security, not by anyone without the proper clearance. 2 Amtrak police officers rounded the corner at a jog, hands resting on their duty belts, but not yet drawing weapons. The older one, a thick-necked man with sergeant stripes, took in the scene with experienced eyes. Woman standing calmly, man writhing on the ground, obvious injury. "Ma'am, step away from him," the sergeant ordered, his voice firm but not aggressive. His partner, a younger woman with sharp features, moved to Ray's side to assess his condition. "He tried to steal my bag," Melissa said evenly, not moving. "I defended my property." "That may be, but you need to step back now," the sergeant repeated. His eyes dropped to the duffel. "We'll sort this out, but I need you to comply." Melissa calculated her options. She could identify herself, explain the situation, but that would raise questions about the bag's contents. She could refuse to cooperate, but that would likely result in arrest. Neither option was acceptable. "I need to make a phone call," she said. "You can make your call after we get statements," the sergeant replied. His partner was calling for an ambulance on her radio, while Ray moaned incoherently about his hand. "No," Melissa said quietly, but with unmistakable authority. "I need to make a call now, not in 5 minutes now." The sergeant's expression hardened. He'd dealt with entitled travelers before, people who thought rules didn't apply to them. "Ma'am, you just broke a man's wrist. You're going to cooperate with our investigation or—" "Sergeant," Melissa interrupted, reaching slowly into her jacket pocket, with 2 fingers clearly visible. "I'm going to show you my identification. I need you to look at it carefully, and then let me make that phone call." She pulled out a leather credential holder and flipped it open. The sergeant leaned in to examine it, and his entire demeanor shifted. His eyes moved from the ID photo to Melissa's face, then back to the ID, then to the official seal embossed on the credential. His jaw tightened. "Jesus Christ," he muttered under his breath. He straightened up, suddenly looking like a man who'd just stepped on a landmine. "Ma'am, what exactly is in that bag?" "Nothing you want to know about," Melissa replied. "The phone call?" The sergeant nodded stiffly and pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, this is Sergeant Kowalski at the main hall. I need a supervisor immediately and get me a direct line to Capitol Police. We have a situation that requires escalation." Ray, still on the ground, managed to gasp out through his pain. "What the hell is happening? She broke my goddamn hand." Nobody answered him. The younger officer had stepped back from Ray, her expression now uncertain as she looked between her sergeant and Melissa. More security personnel were arriving, forming a loose perimeter that was attracting the attention of nearby travelers. Cell phones emerged from pockets. This would be on social media within minutes. Melissa kept her hand on her bag, her face impassive. The next hour would determine whether a covert operation that had taken 6 months to set up would be compromised by a random theft attempt at a train station. Inside that worn duffel bag, beneath the layer of dirty laundry she'd deliberately placed on top, was a leather portfolio bearing the presidential seal of the United States. Inside that portfolio were documents so classified that fewer than 20 people in the entire government knew of their existence. And now, because of one desperate man's mistake, that secret was seconds away from unraveling in the most public place possible. Within 8 minutes, Union Station's main hall had transformed into an impromptu command center. 6 additional Amtrak officers had cordoned off a 50-foot radius around the incident site, redirecting frustrated travelers while trying to appear routine about it. Paramedics had arrived for Ray, who sat slumped against a marble column with his mangled wrist splinted and elevated, his face gray with shock and pain medication. Melissa stood 15 feet away, her bag now on the ground between her feet, her phone pressed to her ear. Sergeant Kowalski had given her the requested privacy, but he maintained visual contact from a position near the security office entrance. His younger partner, Officer Chen, was busy collecting witness statements from the handful of people who'd seen the altercation. The phone rang 3 times before a voice answered. Male, alert despite the late hour, with the clipped precision of someone accustomed to midnight emergencies. Bridger. Colonel, this is Torres. We have a situation. Melissa kept her voice low and controlled, but the urgency bled through anyway. I'm at Union Station in D.C. There was an attempted theft. The asset is secure, but I had to use force. Local police are involved, and we're drawing attention. There was a pause on the other end, the kind of silence that meant someone was recalculating every contingency plan they'd carefully constructed. Colonel David Bridger had spent 30 years in Marine intelligence, and Melissa could practically hear his mind working through the disaster scenarios. How much force? He asked finally. Broken wrist, clean defensive action, but the subject will need hospitalization. More importantly, we've got witnesses, cell phone footage, and Amtrak police requesting explanations I can't provide without clearance escalation. Christ. Another pause. The asset, any compromise? Negative. Bag was never opened or separated from my person. But the station sergeant has seen my credentials, and he's asking the right questions. Melissa heard the distinct sound of a keyboard in the background. Bridger was already mobilizing. I'm pulling up security camera feeds now. Give me your exact position. Main hall, 20 yards west of the Amtrak gates near column 7. I see you? More typing. Okay, I count 4 cameras with angles on your position, and I can see at least 6 civilians who recorded on phones. This is going to leak, Torres. We need damage control immediately. Understood, sir. What are my orders? Stay exactly where you are. Do not let that bag out of your sight, and do not let anyone examine its contents under any circumstances. I'm contacting Capitol Police now to establish a secure perimeter, and I'm dispatching a team from Quantico. They'll be there in 40 minutes. The thief is going to talk, Melissa said, glancing over at Ray, who was now being loaded onto a gurney. He'll want to know why he's not being arrested for attempted robbery. Media gets hold of this, starts asking questions about who I am and what made that bag worth breaking someone's arm over. Let me worry about the media, Bridger cut in. Your job is to maintain possession of that asset and keep your mouth shut until extraction arrives. Do you have anyone approaching you now? Melissa's eyes swept the perimeter. Sergeant Kowalski was walking toward her with another man in a different uniform, Capitol Police, judging by the insignia. Both looked serious. Capitol Police inbound, she reported. Good. I just got through to their operations center. That's Lieutenant Marcus Vance. He's been briefed that you're a federal asset carrier and that he's to provide security support without inquiry. Play it straight with him, but reveal nothing about the contents. Clear? Crystal, sir. Torres. Bridger's voice softened slightly, taking on the tone of a mentor rather than a commanding officer. You did the right thing. That asset cannot fall into unauthorized hands under any circumstances. The president himself signed off on this operation, and what's in that bag could reshape our entire Pacific strategy. You protected it. Now we protect you. The line went dead. Melissa pocketed her phone just as Sergeant Kowalski and Lieutenant Vance reached her position. Vance was tall and lean, probably mid-40s with the bearing of former military. His eyes went immediately to the bag, then to Melissa's face, conducting the same assessment she'd done countless times herself. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Captain Torres, Vance said, making her rank and identity clear for Kowalski's benefit. I've been instructed to provide security support for your transport. We'll be escorting you to a secure location where you can wait for your team to arrive. Kowalski's expression was carefully neutral, but Melissa could see the questions burning behind his eyes. Lieutenant, what about the assault victim? He's being transported to Georgetown Medical Center. Are we filing charges? Vance glanced at Ray's gurney as it was being wheeled toward the exit. That's above my pay grade, Sergeant. For now, your department will take his statement and file a preliminary report. Further action will be determined by federal authorities. Federal authorities, Kowalski repeated slowly. Sir, with respect, I've got a man with a shattered wrist and a dozen witnesses who saw Captain Torres break it. I need to know what jurisdiction we're operating under here. It was the right question, and Melissa respected him for asking it. Kowalski wasn't being difficult. He was being thorough, which was exactly what a good cop should do. Vance pulled out his phone and showed Kowalski a document on the screen. This authorization comes from the Department of Defense, countersigned by Capitol Police Command. Captain Torres is engaged in official federal business of a classified nature. Her actions fall under federal jurisdiction, and your department's involvement ends with documentation of the incident. You'll receive a case number for your reports, but follow-up investigation is being handled by DOD. Kowalski studied the document, his jaw working. Finally, he nodded. Understood. I'll need Captain Torres's contact information for our files. You'll receive it through official channels, Vance replied smoothly. Before Kowalski could respond, a commotion erupted near the main entrance. A man in a rumpled suit with a press badge dangling from his neck was arguing with one of the perimeter officers, his phone held high, clearly trying to record. That's her, the reporter shouted, pointing directly at Melissa. That's the woman who assaulted the homeless veteran. I've got footage of the whole thing. You can't cover this up. Melissa's stomach dropped. Homeless veteran. That was the narrative already forming. In the court of public opinion, she'd just become a Marine officer who'd brutalized a desperate man over a worthless bag. Officer Chen appeared at Kowalski's elbow, her face flushed. Sergeant, we've got a problem. The victim, Raymond Booker, he's got a public record. 2 tours in Iraq with the Army, honorable discharge in 2016. He's been homeless for 3 years. The media's going to crucify us if we don't handle this right. Vance muttered a curse under his breath. Kowalski's expression shifted from professional neutrality to something approaching sympathy, not for Melissa, but for the situation they were all suddenly trapped in. Captain, Vance said quietly, we need to move you now. This is about to get much worse. He wasn't wrong. Melissa could see more people gathering beyond the security cordon, phones out, everyone recording. Social media was already spinning this into a scandal. Marine officer brutalizes homeless Army veteran at train station. The headlines wrote themselves. And somewhere in that crowd, or in the hospital with Ray Booker, or in the news feeds already lighting up with outrage, was someone who would start asking the one question that couldn't be answered. What was so valuable in that bag that it was worth destroying a man's hand to protect it? The answer to that question was currently resting between Melissa's boots, a presidential directive outlining a covert operation in the South China Sea that, if exposed, could trigger an international crisis the likes of which hadn't been seen since the Cold War. Lieutenant Vance touched her elbow. Captain, we need to go, right now. Lieutenant Vance led Melissa through a service corridor that most travelers never knew existed. The narrow hallway smelled of industrial cleaner and recycled air, its concrete walls painted institutional beige. Behind them, 2 Capitol Police officers formed a rear guard, while a third walked point, his hand resting on his sidearm as they navigated the maze of maintenance passages beneath Union Station. Where are we going? Melissa asked, adjusting her grip on the duffel bag. Sub-level parking garage, Section D, Vance replied without looking back. We've got a secure vehicle waiting. Your people should arrive within 30 minutes, but we can't keep you in the main terminal. That reporter isn't going away, and I've already got 3 news vans pulling up outside. They descended a metal staircase, their footsteps echoing in the enclosed space. Melissa's mind was working through worst-case scenarios. The operation she'd been part of for the past 6 months had required absolute secrecy. She'd been selected specifically because her record was clean, her movements predictable, and her cover as a Marine captain on routine assignment was bulletproof. Until 47 minutes ago, when Raymond Booker's desperate grab for what he thought was an easy score had turned everything upside down. The staircase opened into a dimly lit parking structure. Fluorescent tubes buzzed overhead, casting sickly yellow light across rows of civilian vehicles and official government sedans. Vance guided her toward a black Chevrolet Suburban with tinted windows, its engine already running. The driver's door opened and a woman in a dark pantsuit stepped out. She was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun and the kind of face that revealed nothing. Her eyes swept over Melissa with clinical assessment before settling on the bag. Captain Torres, her voice carried the flat accent of someone who'd spent time erasing regional tells. I'm Agent Sarah Reeves, Secret Service. I'll be maintaining custody of your transport until DOD arrival. Secret Service. That elevated things considerably. Melissa knew the protocols. If Secret Service was involved, it meant someone very high up the chain had gotten personally involved in the last half hour. Agent Reeves, Melissa acknowledged. I was told Marine Intelligence was handling extraction. They are. I'm here to ensure nothing else goes wrong between now and then. Reeves opened the Suburban's rear door. Get in. Keep that bag with you. We'll circle the area until your team confirms arrival. Melissa climbed into the back seat, sliding across the leather to the far side. Vance got in beside her while one of his officers took the front passenger seat. Reeves settled back behind the wheel and smoothly pulled out of the parking spot. Status update, Reeves said, addressing no one in particular. She was clearly receiving information through an earpiece. The media has confirmed Torres's identity through facial recognition and cross-reference with military databases. Fox News is running with Marine officer attacks homeless vet. CNN has a former Army JAG lawyer on air questioning the use of force. Twitter's blowing up with justice for Raymond. Melissa closed her eyes briefly. This was exactly the kind of attention that could unravel months of careful preparation. The presidential directive in her bag wasn't just classified. It detailed a network of intelligence assets positioned throughout Southeast Asia, surveillance protocols that technically violated international law, and contingency plans for military intervention that Congress hadn't been briefed on. What's the DOD saying? Vance asked. Nothing yet. They're scrambling to put together a statement that explains why a Marine captain was traveling alone through a civilian train station with classified materials. The optics are terrible no matter how they spin it. The Suburban emerged from the garage onto Massachusetts Avenue, merging into sparse late-night traffic. Through the tinted windows, Melissa could see Union Station's main entrance lit up like a movie premiere. News trucks clustered around the front plaza, satellite dishes pointed at the sky. Reeves's earpiece crackled again. She listened for several seconds, her expression darkening. We've got another problem. Raymond Booker's lawyer just held an impromptu press conference outside Georgetown Medical. He's claiming his client is a Purple Heart recipient who was targeted by an aggressive federal agent. He's demanding Torres's arrest and threatening a civil rights lawsuit. He lawyered up already? Vance sounded surprised. guy was loaded into an ambulance less than an hour ago." "The lawyer found him," Reeves said grimly. "Gerald Hoffman. He's one of those activists who monitors police scanners for potential cases. He specializes in police brutality and military misconduct. This is going to get ugly." Melissa's phone buzzed. A text from Colonel Bridger: "Do not speak to media. Do not explain your actions. Legal team being assembled. Maintain asset security." She typed back, "Understood." The Suburban took a right onto Constitution Avenue, heading east away from the station. Reeves seemed to be following a predetermined route, making random turns that would frustrate any attempt at surveillance. Professional paranoia, the kind that kept people alive in Reeves's line of work. "Can I ask you something, Captain?" Vance's voice was careful, respectful. "You've been in combat. You know how to modulate force. That wrist lock you used, you could have just restrained him. Why break it?" It was a fair question, and Melissa appreciated that he asked it directly rather than letting it fester. She turned to look at him, weighing how much she could say. "When someone tries to take something from you, you have a split second to assess threat level and appropriate response," she began. "If I'd just restrained him, we'd have been stuck there. Me holding him fighting back, both of us on the ground with the bag potentially vulnerable to his accomplice." "Accomplice?" Reeves interjected from the front. "There was only one subject." "That I could see," Melissa corrected. "But you never assume someone working a theft in a public space is operating alone. Maybe there's a partner, maybe there's a lookout, maybe there's someone waiting to grab the bag if the first attempt fails." "I neutralized the immediate threat in a way that guaranteed he couldn't pursue or regroup. Was it harsh? Yes. Was it necessary? Absolutely." Vance nodded slowly, processing this. "The public's not going to see it that way. The public doesn't know what's at stake, and they never will," Reeves added firmly, "which is why we need to control this narrative before it spirals completely out of control. The president's chief of staff is getting briefed right now. If this becomes a national scandal, heads are going to roll, and I guarantee yours will be first in line, Captain." Melissa didn't respond. She knew Reeves was right. In the careful calculus of political damage control, a Marine captain was expendable. The operation wasn't. If it came down to protecting the mission or protecting her career, there was no question which one mattered more. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a news alert. "Breaking. Homeland Security opens investigation into Union Station assault. Marine officer placed on administrative leave pending review." Administrative leave. That was fast. Someone at the Pentagon had already made the decision to distance the Corps from her actions. She was being cut loose, transformed from a trusted operative into a liability in less time than it took to drive across downtown D.C. "Your team's arriving," Reeves announced, checking her mirrors. "Black SUV, 3 vehicles back. Federal plates. That's them." Melissa looked through the rear window and spotted the convoy. 3 identical Suburbans moving in practiced formation. Her extraction had arrived, which meant the next phase was about to begin. The debriefing, the damage assessment, and the inevitable question of whether Captain Melissa Torres had just compromised national security by doing exactly what she was trained to do: protect the mission, no matter the cost. The convoy pulled into an underground facility that Melissa didn't recognize. No signs marked the location. No identifying features distinguished the concrete bunker from a dozen other classified sites scattered throughout the Virginia suburbs. The heavy steel door rolled shut behind them with a finality that made her stomach tighten. Agent Reeves parked and killed the engine. "End of the line, Captain. Your people will take it from here." 2 men in civilian clothes approached the Suburban. Both wore the subtle signs of military bearing beneath their business casual attire. The older one, maybe 45, with graying temples and a weathered face, opened Melissa's door. Captain Torres, I'm Major Frank Garrison, Marine Intelligence Division. This is Captain Josh Hendricks. We'll be conducting your debrief. His eyes dropped to the bag. First things first, we need to secure that asset and verify its contents. Melissa handed over the duffel, watching as Garrison passed it to Hendricks, who immediately walked toward a separate entrance marked with biometric scanners. The bag disappeared behind reinforced doors, taking with it the physical evidence of everything that had gone wrong tonight. "Follow me," Garrison said, gesturing toward a different corridor. They walked in silence through sterile hallways lit by LED panels that cast everything in harsh, white light. The facility had the antiseptic feel of a place built for secrets. No windows, no decorations, just endless doors with keypad locks and cameras positioned at every junction. Garrison led her into a small conference room dominated by a metal table and 4 chairs. A camera mount in the corner tracked their entrance. He motioned for her to sit, then took the chair across from her, placing a tablet on the table between them. "This conversation is being recorded for official review," he began, his tone professional but not unkind. "Before we get into specifics, I need to inform you that you're not under arrest, you're not being charged with any crime, and you have the right to legal counsel. Do you want an attorney present?" "No, sir." "Understood." Garrison tapped the tablet, pulling up what looked like an incident report template. "Let's start from the beginning. What time did you arrive at Union Station?" For the next 40 minutes, Melissa walked through every detail of the encounter. Garrison asked pointed questions, occasionally making notes, but mostly he just listened. He was good at this, extracting information without judgment, letting her tell the story without interruption. When she finished describing the moment she broke Raymond Booker's wrist, Garrison leaned back in his chair and studied her face. "You understand the situation you're in," he said quietly. "This isn't about whether your actions were justified from a tactical standpoint. I've read your service record. 3 combat deployments, expert marksman, advanced MC map instructor. You could have handled that threat 100 different ways. The question everyone's going to ask is why you chose maximum damage." "Because the asset couldn't be compromised," Melissa replied steadily. "My orders were explicit: maintain possession, allow no unauthorized access. I executed those orders by breaking a homeless veteran's wrist in front of dozens of witnesses, by neutralizing a threat to classified materials that could endanger national security." Garrison's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. A flicker of sympathy, maybe, or resignation. "Let me tell you what's happening outside this facility right now. CNN has your military portrait on screen with the Chiron Marine under fire for station assault. MSNBC is running a segment on PTSD and military violence. Fox is debating whether you should face criminal charges. Your name is trending on Twitter, and not in a good way." He swiped the tablet, turning it to face her. The screen showed a video, shaky cell phone footage of the incident. From this angle, in this lighting, with no audio context, it looked exactly like what the media was claiming, an unprovoked attack on a desperate man. "The problem," Garrison continued, "is that we can't defend you without exposing the operation. We can't tell the public what was in that bag or why it mattered. Which means you're going to be crucified in the court of public opinion while we figure out damage control." "I understand, sir." "Do you?" Garrison's voice sharpened slightly. "Because I'm not sure you do. Gerald Hoffman, Booker's attorney, he's already filed a federal lawsuit naming you, the Marine Corps, and the Department of Defense. He's claiming excessive force, violation of civil rights, and he's pushing for a criminal investigation. The press conference he held 2 hours ago has been viewed 3 million times. You're the villain in this story, Captain, and we can't change that narrative." Melissa kept her expression neutral, but internally she was calculating the cascading consequences: court-martial potential, dishonorable discharge, criminal prosecution. Her 12-year career evaporated because she'd done exactly what she was trained and ordered to do. "What's the department's position?" she asked. "Officially, you've been placed on administrative leave pending investigation." "Unofficially," Garrison sighed, "they're trying to figure out how to distance themselves from you without making it obvious that you were on official business. It's a political nightmare." The door opened and Captain Hendricks entered, carrying the leather portfolio that had been inside her bag. He placed it on the table, the presidential seal visible on the cover, and nodded to Garrison. "Contents verified, no breach, all documents accounted for." "Good." Garrison picked up the portfolio and held it up for Melissa to see. "This is what you protected. Presidential Finding 847B, signed 6 months ago. It authorizes a covert intelligence network spanning 7 countries, violates at least 3 international treaties, and if exposed, would create a diplomatic crisis that would make WikiLeaks look like a minor embarrassment." He set the portfolio down with deliberate care. 23 intelligence officers are currently operating under this directive. Their lives depend on this staying secret. The president's entire Pacific strategy depends on this staying secret. And tonight, because of a random theft attempt at a train station, we came within seconds of losing it all. "But we didn't," Melissa pointed out. "The asset is secure. The operation is intact." "For now," Garrison agreed. "But every day this story stays in the news cycle, more people start asking questions. Why was a Marine captain carrying classified materials through a civilian train station? Why didn't she have a security detail? What exactly was in that bag that made it worth hospitalizing someone to protect it?" He leaned forward, his expression grave. "Those are the questions we can't let anyone answer, which means we need to make this story go away. And the fastest way to do that is to give the media a different narrative." Melissa felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. "What kind of narrative?" "One where you made a mistake, where you overreacted because of combat stress, where the Marine Corps is taking appropriate disciplinary action against an officer who failed to exercise proper judgment." Garrison's eyes held hers. "We need you to take the fall, Captain. Publicly, completely. Let them tear you apart while we bury the real story." The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the ventilation system. Melissa understood what was being asked of her. Become the sacrificial lamb, accept the destruction of her reputation and career, all to protect an operation she'd never be able to publicly defend. "And if I refuse?" she asked quietly. "Then we classify everything related to tonight under national security protocols. You get buried in legal proceedings for the next 5 years, and you still lose everything, just more slowly and with criminal charges attached." Garrison's voice held no threat, just cold pragmatism. "This is the only option where you walk away with your life intact, even if your career doesn't survive." Melissa looked at the presidential seal on that portfolio, thinking about the 23 officers operating in hostile territory, trusting that the mission would remain secret. Thinking about the years of intelligence work that had gone into building that network. Thinking about the oath she'd taken 12 years ago to support and defend, even when the cost was personal. "What do you need me to do?" 3 days after the incident, Melissa sat in a sterile conference room at Marine Corps Base Quantico, watching her life get dissected on national television. Major Garrison had arranged for her to stay on base during the initial media firestorm, keeping her isolated from reporters while the public relations team executed their damage control strategy. The television mounted on the wall showed a split screen. On the left Raymond Booker in a hospital bed, his casted wrist elevated, looking gaunt and sympathetic. On the right, her official Marine Corps portrait, the one taken 2 years ago where she looked stern and capable. The chyron read, "Veterans' rights advocates demand justice." This is what happens when we train warriors and then put them in civilian situations without proper de-escalation training, said the host, a woman in a red blazer who'd probably never spent a day in uniform. Raymond Booker is a Purple Heart recipient who served 2 tours in Iraq. He came home to find himself homeless, struggling with PTSD, and now he's got a shattered wrist because he made the mistake of touching the wrong person's bag. The camera cut to Gerald Hoffman, Booker's attorney, speaking from outside Georgetown Medical Center. He'd become a media fixture over the past 72 hours, giving interviews to anyone with a camera. "My client is a hero who defended this country," Hoffman declared, his voice ringing with practiced outrage. "And how did we repay him? By allowing a federal agent to brutalize him in a public space while dozens of people watched. This isn't justice. This is a symptom of a military culture that values violence over humanity." Melissa muted the television. She'd heard enough variations of the same speech over the past 3 days to have it memorized. The narrative had calcified into something unrecognizable. She'd become a symbol of military overreach, while Booker had been transformed into a martyred victim of government aggression. The door opened and Captain Hendricks entered carrying a tablet and 2 cups of coffee. He set one in front of Melissa and took the seat beside her. "You're trending again," he said, not unkindly. "Number 3 on Twitter, right below some celebrity breakup and above a sports scandal. Congratulations." "Fantastic," Melissa muttered, accepting the coffee. "What's the temperature out there?" Hendricks pulled up something on his tablet and angled it so she could see. "Pentagon released your statement an hour ago. Initial reaction is mixed. Some people appreciate the acknowledgement, but the activist groups are saying it doesn't go far enough. They want criminal charges." The statement had been carefully crafted by a team of lawyers and public affairs specialists. It expressed regret about the incident, acknowledged that alternative methods could have been employed, and emphasized her commitment to learning from the experience. It said everything and nothing simultaneously, a masterpiece of bureaucratic language designed to satisfy no one while offending as few as possible. "What about Booker?" Melissa asked. "Has the DOD made contact?" "Yesterday, they sent a Veterans Affairs liaison to the hospital, offered him enrollment in a comprehensive support program, housing, medical care, job training, the works, worth about $200,000 over 2 years. Did he take it?" Hendricks grimaced. He wanted to, but Hoffman is pushing him to hold out for more. He sees this as his big case, the one that gets him national recognition. He's not going to let it go for a benefits package. Melissa sipped her coffee, feeling the bitter liquid burn down her throat. "Then we're back to square one." "Not entirely. The DOJ is preparing an offer for Hoffman himself, that consulting position Hartley mentioned. They're going to pitch it tomorrow. If he accepts, Booker loses his lawyer, and suddenly that benefits package looks a lot more attractive. And if Hoffman doesn't accept, then things get complicated." Hendricks set down his tablet. "There's something else you should know. We've been monitoring social media, and there's a concerning development. Some veterans groups are planning a protest outside Quantico. They're calling it a solidarity march for Booker." Melissa felt her stomach drop. "When?" "Tomorrow afternoon. We're estimating maybe 200-300 people. Local police are coordinating with base security. You'll need to stay inside until it's over." "I'm a prisoner now?" "You're protected," Hendricks corrected. "There's a difference. Some of those protesters are angry, and anger makes people unpredictable. We can't risk someone getting footage of you being confronted by veterans. It would destroy any chance we have of controlling this narrative." Melissa stood and walked to the window, looking out at the base grounds. Marines jogged past in formation, their cadence carrying faintly through the glass. This was supposed to be her world, the one place where duty and honor meant something tangible, where actions were judged by results rather than optics. Instead, she was trapped in a conference room, watching her reputation burn on cable news, while protesters gathered to demand her head. "How did we get here?" she asked quietly. Hendricks joined her at the window. "You did your job. The world didn't care about the why, only the what. That's the game now. Perception matters more than truth." "That's not the core I joined." "It's not the core any of us joined," Hendricks agreed. "But it's the core we've got. You think Admiral Hartley likes this? You think Major Garrison enjoys watching a good officer get crucified? We're all just trying to navigate a system that's broken in ways we can't fix." Melissa's phone buzzed. She pulled it from her pocket and saw a text from her sister, Linda. "Just saw the news. Are you okay? Everyone's asking about you. This is insane." She typed back, "I'm fine. Don't believe everything you see on TV." Linda's response came immediately. "That's what they all say before they're not fine. Call me when you can. Love you." Melissa pocketed the phone without responding. What could she say? That she was being sacrificed to protect an operation she couldn't talk about? That the past 12 years of her career were being reduced to a 10-second video clip of her breaking a homeless man's wrist? That she'd signed a statement accepting blame for doing exactly what she was trained and ordered to do? The television screen behind them flickered to a new segment. This time it was a retired Army general being interviewed, someone Melissa vaguely recognized from Defense Department briefings. Hendricks muted it. "And I think we need to ask ourselves some hard questions," the general was saying, his voice measured and authoritative. Why was Captain Torres traveling alone through a civilian train station with classified materials? Where was her security detail? Why wasn't there a proper protocol in place for this kind of transport? The host leaned forward. "Are you suggesting the Marine Corps failed Captain Torres?" "I'm suggesting the system failed both Captain Torres and Mr. Booker. We've created a situation where a dedicated officer felt she had no choice but to use maximum force, and a desperate veteran felt he had no choice but to commit theft. Those are systemic failures, not individual ones." Melissa felt something shift in her chest. Not quite hope, but something adjacent to it. Someone with credibility was asking the right questions, pushing the narrative away from simple villain and victim dynamics toward something more complex. "That's General Marcus Whitmore," Hendricks said. "Retired 3 years ago, runs a veterans advocacy group now. He's got juice with both political parties." "Is he on our side?" Melissa asked. "He's on the side of not letting this become a partisan circus, which, functionally, means he's on our side." Hendricks checked his watch. "Look, the DOJ is meeting with Hoffman tomorrow morning. If that goes well, this whole thing could start de-escalating by the weekend. You just need to keep your head down for a few more days." "And if it doesn't go well?" Hendricks didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice carried the weight of someone delivering bad news he'd rather avoid. "Then we activate the state secrets protocol, classify the entire incident, and you spend the next 6 months fighting a court battle you can't win because you can't defend yourself. But it won't come to that. Hoffman's not stupid. He'll take the deal." Melissa turned back to the window, watching a C-130 transport plane lift off from the runway in the distance. Somewhere out there, 23 intelligence officers were continuing their operations, completely unaware that their mission had nearly been compromised by a chance encounter in a Sioux train station. They'd never know how close they'd come to exposure. They'd never know what she'd sacrificed to keep them safe. And maybe that was how it should be. The whole point of covert operations was that success meant invisibility. The mission continued, the assets remained protected, and the officers who made it possible disappeared into the background noise of bureaucracy and classified files. "Captain Torres," Hendricks' voice pulled her from her thoughts. "You still with me?" "Yeah," she said. "I'm here." "Good, because tomorrow's going to be rough. The protest, the media coverage, all of it. But you're going to get through this. We all are." Melissa nodded, but she wasn't thinking about tomorrow. She was thinking about the moment in Union Station when Raymond Booker's hand closed around her bag, and the split-second decision that had led to all of this. Would she make the same choice again, knowing what she knew now? The answer came immediately, without hesitation. Yes, the mission always came first. That was the oath she'd taken, the code she lived by. Personal cost was irrelevant when weighed against national security, even if that cost was everything she'd worked for. The chanting started at 1 p.m., drifting across the Quantico grounds like distant thunder. From her quarters on the third floor of the bachelor officers' housing, Melissa could hear the voices rising and falling in rhythmic anger. "Justice for Raymond! Justice for Raymond!" She stood at the window, careful to stay back from the glass, where telephoto lenses couldn't capture her silhouette. The protesters had gathered outside the main gate, held back by base security and local police. From this distance, they looked like any other crowd, a mass of bodies holding signs, some wearing veterans' caps and military jackets, others in civilian clothes bearing the marks of activist organizations. Major Garrison had forbidden her from going anywhere near the perimeter. "You show your face, and this goes from a protest to a confrontation," he'd said that morning. "Stay invisible. Let them shout at an empty building." So she watched from 300 yards away, a ghost in her own story. Her phone rang. "Colonel Bridger." "Sir," she answered. "Captain, I'm watching the news coverage of the protest. How are you holding up?" "I've been better, sir." Bridger's laugh was humorless. "I imagine so. Listen, I'm calling with an update on the Hoffman situation. DOJ made their pitch this morning, offered him a 2-year consulting contract with full benefits and a seat on the Policy Review Board, guaranteed media access and the authority to make real recommendations on use of force protocols." Melissa felt her pulse quicken. "Did he take it?" "He asked for 24 hours to consider, which, in lawyer speak, means he's already negotiating better terms. My read is he'll accept by end of business tomorrow. He wants this just as much as we want him to have it. He's just making sure he maximizes his leverage first." "And Booker?" "That's the interesting part. Our liaison met with him again yesterday evening without Hoffman present. Booker's conflict. He didn't want to hurt anyone, and he's genuinely remorseful about the whole thing. The benefits package we offered would change his life completely. Housing, healthcare, job placement assistance. He wants to take it." "But Hoffman's in his ear telling him to hold out," Melissa finished. "Exactly, which is why we're applying pressure from another angle. We've contacted the Veterans Advocacy Group that organized today's protest, told them that Booker has been offered comprehensive support, but his attorney is blocking acceptance. We framed it as a lawyer exploiting a vulnerable veteran for personal gain." Melissa moved away from the window, processing this new tactical move. "You're turning the protesters against Hoffman. We're giving them accurate information and letting them draw their own conclusions," Bridger corrected smoothly. "General Whitmore, you saw him on TV yesterday. He's the one who organized this protest. He's a principled man. If he believes Hoffman is preventing Booker from getting help, he'll shift his position, and where Whitmore goes, the movement follows." It was ruthless and elegant in equal measure. The DoD wasn't just offering solutions, they were engineering consent, manipulating the very people who'd gathered to oppose them. "When will we know if it worked?" Melissa asked. "Whitmore's giving a press conference in 2 hours. If our information landed the way we think it did, he'll pivot from demanding your prosecution to demanding that Booker get the support he deserves. It won't happen all at once, but it'll start the narrative shift we need." Melissa sat down on her bunk, suddenly exhausted. "This whole thing is a chess game, isn't it? Moving pieces around, sacrificing pawns, all to protect the king. That's war, Captain. Doesn't matter if it's kinetic or political, the fundamentals are the same. Achieve your objective with minimum casualties and maximum efficiency." "And what's my objective now, sir? Survive until the news cycle moves on?" Bridger's tone softened. "Your objective is to remember why you did what you did. You protected an operation that's currently providing intelligence on Chinese naval movements in the South China Sea. Last week, that intelligence prevented a potential confrontation between our carrier group and their destroyers. 3,000 sailors came home safe because of information gathered under Finding 847B. That's what you protected when you broke Raymond Booker's wrist." The weight of those words settled over her like a blanket. 3,000 sailors. The abstract concept of the mission suddenly had faces, families, futures that continued because she'd made a split-second decision in a train station. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. We're not out of the woods. Keep your head down. Stay away from windows and let us handle the external situation. I'll call you after Whitmore's press conference." The line went dead. Melissa set her phone aside and lay back on the bunk, staring at the ceiling tiles. The chanting outside had grown louder, more voices joining the chorus. She wondered if any of them knew the full story, or if they were operating on the same fragmented information that had fueled every major protest in the social media age. Partial truths, emotional appeals, and the human need to find villains in complex situations. Someone knocked on her door. "Come in," she called. Captain Hendricks entered carrying a tablet and looking grimmer than usual. "We've got a development. One of the local news stations got an interview with Raymond Booker. Must have sent a crew to the hospital. It aired 10 minutes ago." He handed her the tablet. The video showed Booker in his hospital bed, looking smaller and more fragile than Melissa remembered from that night at Union Station. His casted wrist rested on a pillow, and his eyes held a haunted quality that the camera captured with unflinching clarity. The reporter, a young woman with aggressive energy, leaned in close. "Mr. Booker, you've become the face of a national conversation about military violence against civilians. How do you feel about that?" Booker shifted uncomfortably. I never wanted this. What happened at the station, that was my fault. I shouldn't have grabbed her bag. I was desperate, yeah, but that doesn't make it right." The reporter's expression showed surprise. This wasn't the narrative she'd come for. "But Captain Torres broke your wrist. Aren't you angry?" "Angry? I don't know." Booker's voice cracked slightly. "I'm confused more than anything. I served 8 years. I know how we're trained. If someone tries to take something you're protecting, you stop them. She did what she was supposed to do. I'm the one who screwed up." "You're defending the woman who put you in the hospital?" "I'm saying it's more complicated than everyone wants it to be." Booker looked directly at the camera. "My lawyer, Mr. Hoffman, he's a good man. He wants to help me. But I've been offered real support, housing, medical care, all the things I've needed for 3 years. I want to take it. I want to move on with my life. I don't want to be a symbol or a cause. I just want to heal and start over." The interview cut to the reporter's stand-up outside the hospital. A surprising statement from Raymond Booker, whose case has sparked national debate. His attorney, Gerald Hoffman, declined to comment on Booker's remarks. Back to you in the studio. Melissa handed the tablet back to Hendricks. He's breaking from his lawyer. Publicly, Hendricks confirmed. This changes everything. Hoffman can't maintain his crusade if his own client is undermining the narrative. And the protesters outside, they came here thinking they were supporting Booker's fight for justice. But if Booker himself is saying he wants to accept help and move forward, then they don't have a cause anymore, Melissa finished. As if on cue, the chanting outside began to falter. Melissa returned to the window, maintaining her distance, and watched as confusion rippled through the crowd. People were checking their phones, watching the interview on social media, showing screens to their neighbors. The unified anger that had powered the protest for the past hour was fracturing into uncertainty. Hendricks joined her at the window. Whitmore's press conference is in 90 minutes. If he pivots the way Bridger thinks he will, this protest dissolves by dinner time. The story becomes veteran chooses, healing over revenge, instead of military brutality must be punished. And I just fade into the background, Melissa said. You become a footnote in a larger story about how the system fails veterans and how we need to fix it. Booker becomes the sympathetic figure who chose grace over anger. Hoffman becomes the lawyer who got outmaneuvered. Everyone gets a narrative they can live with. Except her. She'd still carry the incident in her permanent record, still face the lowered career ceiling, still be remembered by anyone who bothered to dig deeper, as the Marine who broke a homeless veteran's wrist over a bag she couldn't explain. But 3,000 sailors had come home safe. Measured against that, her reputation felt like a small price to pay. Captain? Hendricks was watching her carefully. You okay? Yeah, Melissa said, surprised to find it was almost true. I think I am. Outside, the protest was dissolving. Groups peeled away from the main crowd, some heading to parking lots, others clustering to debate what Booker's interview meant. The police looked relieved. Base security started repositioning, preparing for an orderly dispersal rather than a sustained confrontation. Melissa's phone buzzed with a text from her sister. Just saw the interview with Booker. He seems like a good guy who made a bad choice. Are they going to drop the case? She typed back. Maybe. We'll see. Linda responded immediately. Good. You deserve better than this. Melissa stared at those words. You deserve better, and felt something close to peace. Maybe she did deserve better. Maybe the system that had put her in this position was flawed and unfair. Maybe there were a dozen ways this could have been handled differently. But standing in that train station 3 days ago with Raymond Booker's hand on her bag and 23 intelligence officers depending on her to protect their operation, she'd made the only choice she could live with. Everything else was just noise. 6 months later, Captain Melissa Torres stood in the parking lot of a Veterans Rehabilitation Center in Richmond, Virginia, watching the spring rain streak across her windshield. She'd driven 2 hours for this meeting, taking personal leave from her new assignment at Marine Corps Combat Development Command, a desk job that kept her far from classified courier duties and even farther from public scrutiny. The media storm had eventually passed. Just as Colonel Bridger predicted, General Whitmore's press conference had shifted the narrative within 48 hours. Gerald Hoffman had accepted the DOJ's consulting position, withdrawing from Booker's case with a carefully worded statement about pursuing systemic change over individual litigation. Raymond Booker had taken the veterans' benefits package and disappeared from the news cycle entirely. Melissa had remained at Quantico for 3 weeks, watching her name slowly fade from Twitter trends and cable news chyruns. By the time she received orders for her new posting, the incident had been reduced to a cautionary tale discussed in military law classes and use of force seminars. a case study in how good intentions and bad circumstances could create public relations disasters. She'd never spoken to Raymond Booker after that night, never heard his voice beyond the television interview, never learned what had driven him from 2 tours in Iraq to sleeping in train stations and attempting theft to survive. Until this morning, when she'd received an email through official Marine Corps channels. The subject line read, "Request for meeting R. Booker." The message had been brief, almost formal. Booker explained that he was 6 months into his rehabilitation program, living in transitional housing and working part-time at the same veterans center where he received services. He'd asked if she would be willing to meet him to talk about what happened, to maybe find some closure that neither of them had gotten from lawyers and press conferences. Major Garrison had advised against it. "You don't owe him anything," he'd said over the phone. "The incident is closed. Meeting him just reopens old wounds." But Melissa had agreed anyway. Some wounds needed to be reopened before they could properly heal. She checked her watch. 2:58 p.m. The meeting was scheduled for 3 o'clock. She grabbed her jacket and stepped out into the rain, jogging across the parking lot to the center's main entrance. The building was modest but well-maintained, with the practical architecture of a facility designed for function over aesthetics. Inside, the lobby smelled of fresh paint and floor polish. A receptionist directed her to a community room down the hall, where Booker was waiting. He stood when she entered, and for a moment they just looked at each other. 2 people whose lives had intersected violently and then diverged into separate narratives of consequence and recovery. Booker looked different, healthier. He'd gained weight, his face no longer carrying that hollow-eyed desperation she remembered from Union Station. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt, and his right wrist bore the faint scars of surgical repair beneath his watch. "Captain Torres," he said, his voice steady but nervous. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "Mr. Booker." She extended her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, he shook it. His grip was careful, conscious of the injury she'd inflicted. "Your email said you wanted to talk." "Yeah, can we sit?" They took chairs at a small table near the window. Rain drummed against the glass, creating a buffer of white noise that made the conversation feel private despite the open door. Booker folded his hands on the table, studying them like they held answers he was still searching for. "I've been in therapy for 5 months now, working through a lot of stuff. The deployments, coming home, becoming homeless. My therapist says I need to take responsibility for my actions, including what happened that night." Melissa waited, letting him find his words. "I tried to steal from you," Booker continued. "I saw you carrying that bag, and I made a calculation. Thought maybe you had something valuable, something I could pawn to get a meal and a warm place to sleep. I didn't think about you as a person, just as a target." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "That was wrong. And what happened afterward, you breaking my wrist, that was my fault. I put myself in that situation. The force I used was excessive for the circumstances," Melissa said quietly. It was the first time she'd said those words outside of official statements and legal documents. "I could have restrained you without causing permanent damage." "Maybe, but you didn't know what I might do. You didn't know if I had a weapon or backup or what my intentions were. You made a split-second decision based on incomplete information." Booker managed a thin smile. "We were both trained to assess threats and respond. You just responded better than I attacked." The honesty in his voice caught Melissa off guard. She'd expected anger or at least residual resentment. Instead, she heard acceptance, the kind that came from someone who'd spent months examining their choices and learning to live with the consequences. "I saw your interview," she said. "The one where you told the reporter it was more complicated than people wanted it to be. That pissed off a lot of people. My lawyer especially." Booker shook his head. but it was the truth. Everyone wanted me to be angry, to demand justice, to make you into a villain, but I couldn't do that. You were protecting something and I was trying to steal it. Those are the facts, regardless of how the media wanted to spin it. You lost your lawyer because of that interview. I lost a guy who wanted to make me into a poster child for his career. What I gained was a chance to actually rebuild my life. Booker gestured around the room. This program, housing, therapy, job training, it's given me more than any lawsuit ever would have. I'm learning carpentry. I've got an apartment lined up for next month. I'm reconnecting with my sister in North Carolina. That interview was the best thing I could have done. Melissa felt tension she hadn't realized. She was carrying to begin to release. I'm glad you're getting help, truly. I know what you were carrying that night, Booker said suddenly. The room seemed to contract. Melissa's training kicked in immediately. Deny, deflect, assess if containment was necessary. I don't know what you mean. Not specifically, Booker clarified quickly, seeing her reaction. I don't know the details, but about 2 months ago, a guy from DOD came to talk to me. Never gave me his name, just showed me credentials. He said that what you were protecting that night was important to national security. Said I didn't need to know more than that, but that he wanted me to understand my attempt to steal that bag could have had consequences way beyond you and me. What did you tell him? That I figured as much. You don't break someone's wrist over a bag full of gym clothes. Booker leaned back in his chair. He also said that you'd been reassigned, that the incident had affected your career. He didn't say it directly, but I got the impression you'd taken a hit for protecting whatever was in that bag. Melissa chose her words carefully. Military service involves sacrifice. Sometimes that sacrifice is obvious: combat, deployments, time away from family. Sometimes it's more subtle, but it's always in service of something larger than ourselves. That's what I told myself in Iraq, Booker said softly. Every mission, every patrol, every time we rolled outside the wire, we were serving something bigger. Then I came home and that sense of purpose just evaporated. I couldn't find it again. That's how I ended up sleeping in train stations and stealing from strangers. You found it now? Starting to. It's different than military service. Smaller, more personal. But I'm helping other vets through the program here. Sharing my story, showing them there's a path forward even when everything seems broken. He met her eyes again, including showing them that sometimes the people we think are our enemies are just doing their jobs, same as we did. They sat in companionable silence for a moment. Two veterans who'd met as adversaries and somehow found common ground in shared understanding of duty, consequence, and the messy reality between right and wrong. I should go, Melissa said finally, standing. I've got a long drive back to Quantico. Booker stood as well. Captain, Melissa, if that's okay, thank you for meeting me, for giving me a chance to say what I needed to say. Thank you for reaching out, and for the interview. You probably don't know this, but what you said that day helped shift the narrative, made it possible for both of us to move forward. I just told the truth, seemed like the least I could do. They shook hands again, and this time the gesture felt less like a formality and more like a genuine connection between two people who'd been through something terrible and come out the other side changed, but intact. Melissa drove back to Quantico through the rain, her mind processing the conversation. She thought about the bag, about presidential finding 847B, about the 23 intelligence officers still operating in the Pacific. She thought about the 3,000 sailors who'd come home safe, and the countless others who would benefit from intelligence they'd never know existed. She thought about her career ceiling, about the opportunities that would never come, about the general stars she'd never wear. And she thought about Raymond Booker, rebuilding his life one day at a time, teaching other veterans that redemption was possible even after you'd hit bottom. The incident would never disappear from her record. The classified flag in her file would always be there, a silent barrier to advancement. But sitting across from Booker in that community room, seeing him healthy and purposeful and moving forward, she'd found something more valuable than career advancement. She'd found peace with her choices. The mission had been protected. Lives had been saved. A fellow veteran had gotten a second chance. In the moral arithmetic of service and sacrifice, those outcomes justified the cost. Melissa turned on the radio, letting music fill the car as she drove through the Virginia countryside. Somewhere in the South China Sea, intelligence officers were gathering information that would prevent the next crisis. Somewhere in Richmond, Raymond Booker was helping another veteran find hope. Somewhere in the Pentagon, classified files documented an operation that would remain secret for decades. And somewhere between all of those places, a Marine captain who'd done her duty continued to serve, carrying the weight of consequences she'd never regret. Because that's what Marines did. They protected what mattered, paid whatever price was required, and moved forward with the knowledge that some battles were won in shadows, measured not in medals or promotions, but in missions accomplished and lives preserved. That night at Union Station, when Raymond Booker's fingers closed around her bag, Melissa Torres had made a choice that defined the next chapter of her life. 6 months later, given the same circumstances and the same stakes, she would make that choice again, every single time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.